Thank you all for coming out tonight. Loretta?
Pleasure to be here after 3 years. This is the one issue that's brought me out. I first became involved with the aquarium cetacean controversy in 1999 and served on this board from 2002 to 2011. My experience has been that every 3 years, a newly elected park board would be compelled to tackle the ethics of keeping cetaceans at the aquarium. The controversy of confining cetaceans in Stanley Park has a long history and is an old battle. For at least 2 decades, a period that coincides with Mr. Nightingale's arrival to the aquarium in 1994, successive park boards have grappled with the commercial practices of a private organization operating in a public park. Consequently, the aquarium has developed a comprehensive public relations machine to respond to these challenges. On Saturday, I listened to aquarium staff members talk passionately about their dedication to the care of whales and dolphins, something that I do not doubt and that is not being questioned by the park board in this review. Currently, the job descriptions of staff and their livelihoods are wrapped around these animals. It is understandable that aquarium staff feel that they need to defend the aquarium's practice of confining and breeding cetaceans. In all past public debates, the aquarium has heralded its rescue activities rather than responding to the question of why it is essential to display cetaceans. If all else fails, the aquarium threatens to sue the park board for lost revenues. This places politicians in the untenable optics of responding to public opinion while safeguarding public funds from lawsuits. I understand the pressure that this board is going through. In the 2005 municipal elections, the aquarium went so far as to campaign against Cope and Green Park Board candidates through letters and emails to aquarium members. The aquarium even put up one of their own staff members, Heather Holden, to run for park board. Ms. Holden was elected and the NPA selected her to be chair of the park board. Although the aquarium would argue that Ms. Holden recused herself from voting in the 2006 expansion debate, 6 months after Holden was elected, the expansion debate came to the board. In the 2006 expansion debate, there was an interesting dynamic taking place at the board where 3 commissioners, myself included, refused to support the expansion and 3 commissioners supported the expansion. A vote of 3 to 3 would have resulted in no approval for the expansion. Under these circumstances, the no commissioners were able to negotiate with the yes commissioners for the extraction of the bylaw from the aquarium lease and to propose a review of the bylaw. This is a difficult and complex situation, and no park board has had success in assuring the public that the whales and dolphins are in the best place that they could be. If the aquarium was situated on private land, the park board would not be involved in this. However, the aquarium is situated in a public park. Therefore, the park board is compelled to monitor the actions of the aquarium. It may be time for another entity to provide oversight between the aquarium and the park board for the term of the lease, which goes to 2028. An entity or organization or committee that is respected by the public for its knowledge and advocacy on animal welfare. It is not in the public's best interest to have the aquarium report their practices to themselves and to the park board.
Thank you.
Former Commissioner Woodcock, I have the 2000 minutes from 2006 here with me, and I just wanted to get some clarification from you on those minutes. On a motion that you put forward. A request to amend the motion to remove the Parks Control bylaw from the agreement with the aquarium was suggested to allow discussions on the bylaw and the possibility of discontinuing display of cetaceans at any time, rather if the bylaw were to be tied in with the agreement and this discussion cannot take place. Could you expand on that?
Yes, there was a lot of debate at that year in 2006. In fact, we had 3 meetings, starting with a meeting in June. And the aquarium did not want to take the bylaw out of the release because we were looking at a lease that went, reinstating a lease for 20 years, which is a long time. And so if you left the bylaw as it was in the lease, then you could never alter the bylaw. So at that time, we had, there's 3 commissioners that were not supporting the aquarium's expansion, and there was 3 commissioners that were, and that left us to without an approval. So because of that exercise, we were able to extract the bylaw out of the lease, and the intention that whole time for the bylaw was to explore the future of having cetaceans in Stanley Park.
All right. And just to follow up to that, I just wanted a little bit of clarification on this as well. A member of the board referred to the controversy on the subject of capturing cetaceans from the wild. A future board to be urged to review the bylaw in 2012.
Yes, that was myself. I suggested that we have the bylaw review in 2012 because we were looking at an expansion and recognizing that there were some large capital resources that were involved in the expansion. I suggested that we review the bylaw in 2012. The NPA said no, we need to review the bylaw later. And there was an amendment to the bylaw to review it in 2015, which myself and another commissioner voted against. So the bylaw, the review, went to 2015 instead of 2012. And we did that because we want, in all fairness to the aquarium, we wanted them to know where they were going to be going with their expansion plans.
And in your opinion,
Okay.
sorry. In your opinion, I guess what you're saying is that you voted against it because the bylaw you should be able to look at the bylaw at any time.
Well, we can look at the bylaw at any time. That's
that's
our governance model. But I voted against the 2015 review for the very reason that we're here today, because the aquarium is saying that they're expanding they've made plans to expand the pools, and now we're into it now. So I understand that we're into phase 2 coming up. We've done phase 1, and this is still timely review for the bylaw thing.
Loretta, a few more questions for you. So it was understood by the entire board, although you voted against the specific date, 2012, the understanding was the bylaws were being pulled out of the lease specifically to allow a future board the option to change the bylaws if they saw fit.
Yes.
Okay. I'm under the impression that there were, in addition to pulling those out, that there was some changes made to the cetacean bylaws.
In 2007?
2007.
And I think that one of the things that I would recommend is to reinstate the previous bylaw language that was voted out in 2007. And the previous bylaw language is as follows. An animal that has been captured or otherwise taken from its natural wild habitat for the purpose of rehabilitating it from injury or preventing its death due to stranding, provided that its capture or taking and subsequent release to natural habitat is done under the jurisdiction and with the approval of the federal agency responsible, and provide the park board has been informed in as timely manner as possible. That was amended to an animal that has been injured or otherwise in distress and in need of assistance to survive a rehabilitation, whether or not the intention is to release it back into the natural wild habitat. There's a lot of debate around the word distress, because unlike an animal that's stranded, an animal that's in distress can be put in distress by being chased in the ocean or caught in a Japanese fishing, dolphin fishing slaughter.
In the discussions around the tank expansion, was it conveyed to you and your colleagues at the time that this was for the purpose of having lots more whales, or was it, how was it portrayed to you, pitched to you from the aquarium? What was the purpose of the expansion?
There was a lot of discussions because we had a phase 1 and a phase 2, and of course there were going to be a lot more tanks. So the question at that time was, well, what is the plan? And the plan was to bring more cetaceans into those tanks. And so it was it was a given that you wouldn't expand the aquarium and put bigger pools in it. It wasn't because they wanted to give more room for the cetaceans that they had. It was because they wanted to have more cetaceans in the pool.
Okay. You mentioned in your presentation that you talked about the threat of lawsuit, and something that we've heard in the media. And I thought, wondering if you could elaborate. If there were specific times, I know when the COPE was a majority a few years earlier, was this something that reared its head in the media, or are you speaking from recollection of earlier park boards?
I'm speaking from experience from informal dialogues that we had, and I've had a number of years to contemplate this since I was in the hot seat. And I know this is a very difficult issue for commissioners. And an organization can threaten to sue, and it's difficult to predetermine the results of a lawsuit. The aquarium would have to provide a rationale as to why it can't or is not willing to change a business model over the term of its lease. And the core issue is whether a public authority can have this legislative power to restrict activity of a nonprofit organization on public land.
I have another one, but I'm going to wait a minute. What else? More questions on the recommendations that were approved on Monday, November 27th, A through I. The last one, I, that it is the board's intention that in 2015 the board review the park board control bylaws relating to captive cetaceans. That was approved by the board. And you weren't in favor of the date. But was your recollection that that meant that a future board would be in a position to review all bylaws pertaining to cetacean captivity, or just a few specific subsets? What I'm getting at is on Saturday, Dr. Nightingale felt that his recollection was that this was very specific to a couple of bylaws, but not the entire package. And that's not what the public record shows in terms of the official minutes passed by the board. And I was hoping that you can enlighten us as a commissioner who sat in those meetings.
Well, first of all, I could just read the minutes, which were approved by the whole board.
That's what we did.
And it's a request to amend the motion to remove the parks control bylaw from the agreement with the aquarium was suggested to allow discussions on the bylaw and the possibility of discontinuing displays of cetaceans at any time. Rather, if the bylaw were to be tied in with the agreement, this discussion cannot take place. And as well, a member of the board referred to the controversy on the subject of capturing cetaceans in the wild. The future board be urged to review the bylaw in 2012. So it was part of the discussion.
But all the bylaws, or a specific subset of the bylaws?
Well, it talks about the bylaw 9E here, and it's 9E is got quite a few pieces to 9E. So it would be 9E would be encompassing. But the particular one that we were in dispute about, and it was a subsequent dispute in 2007, was a 9E number 9, which is the one I had read out to you, which I had suggested that we reinstate the previous language of 9E number 9.
One last question before we move on to Commissioner Sharma. On Saturday, I had been reviewing the leases going back several years with the aquarium. The recent one, 99, 97, got a few back from the 1980s. When I was reviewing the lease, and this is of course back in 99, those bylaws were at that time inserted in the lease. And so your board that you were part of, we voted to remove them out so that future board could review them. But there was a clause, one of the clauses here that which no one seems to know what happened to O's. So from 1999, and then when the lease was renewed in 2009, this one clause has disappeared, and I wanted to know if you were looking for O. No one knows what happened to O. Let me read it. I can read it out to you. No one knows what happened to O. Investigate and, where viable, implement alternatives to whale exhibition and research whale release and whale rehabilitation, and in brackets. And for the purpose of this clause, it is agreed that viable means an alternative to which the society and the park board mutually agree to maintain the financial viability of the aquarium. That was in the 1999 lease.
Yeah, it was, and I've got the 1999 lease right there.
And that's page 6 of that lease. But that disappeared. And I wanted to know if in your discussions, when you were on the board in 2006, when you gave direction to staff as a board to pull out those specific bylaws, if there was discussion with staff as to get rid of O, or if that was done behind the scenes.
That 1990 lease was reinstated in 2007. I was on the board from 2002 to 2005. It never came to the board. and that was a co-board. I was on the board from 2005 to 2008. That was an NPA board. It never came to the board, and it was reinstated in 2007. And from 2008 to 2011, that was a vision board, and it never came to the board. So that, and my recommendation is that there be an addendum to have put that back into the lease.
Well, I can tell you, when I talked to one of our former senior managers, Mr. Curran, who was at the time our interim general manager, and he signed the release renewal. I asked him specifically if he remembered any discussions of pulling O out under the vision term, and he says, I've never seen O before in my life.
O is a very integral, I mean, the leases, there are clauses that are changed in leases, and they don't come to the board necessarily, but that's a very integral clause. I mean, that speaks to the whole core of the debate here today. So the fact that that would not come to a park board, that undermines my ability to perform my duty as an elected official on behalf of the public.
Okay, well, thank you. We still don't know what happened to O. But moving on to Commissioner Charlotte.
I mean, you actually asked all my questions.
I'm sorry. I'm too prepared.
Thank you. You answered us a lot of mine as well, but I do have a couple more. One is, and this was 2006 again, November 27th special board meeting, and it was moved by Commissioner Herbert that a recommendation, it's recommendation G, be added to the motion. And I'll just read it out, just I don't split it up ears. That the Vancouver Aquarium agreed to supply 1,000 individual passes, sorry, I'm starting to lose, individual passes at no cost to each Vancouver Park Board Community Centre on an annual basis, to be administered by Park Board staff to enable low-income Vancouverites an opportunity to attend the aquarium. It was carried unanimously. And I have asked, again through staff, we have no recollection of that being done to this point. We are now in 2014. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on that discussion. I mean, there you have something that did pass unanimously. And I'm
Well, I
wondering,
remember that because Commissioner Herbert, that was the reason why he supported the expansion, because he felt that low-income people should have access to something that they're not able to have. So that was the reason why he supported the expansion, was that.
okay. But do you remember if there was discussion as to, and it doesn't, I've read through all the minutes and everything within this day, it doesn't specify it was waiting until the expansion.
No.
It was supposed to happen, my understanding was.
Well, it's been 8 years, so I guess
Yeah.
I have to ask, when is it going to happen?
When is it going to happen?
We did have phase 1 of the expansion, and it's not happened yet.
Okay, I have an interest, that you mentioned something very interesting, concerning and interesting to me, which is that Cope and Greens, I would almost use the word suffered, an elaborate campaign against these party candidates running. I'm wondering, again, we as much as it's hard to do, to try and keep this nonpartisan, to try and focus on the issues, listening to people that are coming to the table. Can you elaborate on what you mean by, I mean, it's almost like a smear campaign against specific candidates or specific parties to not vote for them to come or to run for Park Board?
Yeah, in an email, the Aquarium quoted several Park Board candidates, including 2 opponents of keeping cetaceans in captivity, a Green Party and Cope. And they also quoted 3 supporters of the Aquarium, which were all NPA coincidentally. And quote was, if you care about your aquarium and the animals that live there, don't let a small group of activists decide your future, our future. Vote wisely on November 19th and ask your friends and family to do the same. And I think that's really, there was also highlighted comments by the NPA candidate Heather Holden, who was an employee of the Aquarium. So I think that was totally inappropriate, and I wonder if it's a question of the Societies Act in terms of the Aquarium's role in campaigning in our municipal election.
So just a follow-up question, can you tell me what the date of that was, as well as where did it was an email, so where did the email come from?
Well, actually, I actually did see the letter, but I can't find it anymore. But I did manage to find an article with the George Strait, and they had talked about that, and that was November of 2005.
November of 2005.
I have a box of documents that I've been collecting since 1999, and I knew I've seen that letter, and I couldn't find it. It's in there somewhere.
Okay, I have one other question, and this is something that I did hunt for and I couldn't find. Was there ever any discussion? We keep hearing about the fact that the research facility is so important. We hear about education being so important. We hear about the aquarium and that close up, seeing the animals. Was there ever any discussion of the actual rehab and rehabilitation center being open to the public so the public can actually see these animals, the public can see where they're being housed, what the work that's being done, talk about the environment, the bigger picture, which is there's a reason that they're all on our shores. Why are they there? Why is the ice melting? And just, was there ever discussion about making that open to the public and sharing that information?
I think there was some question about having a viewing area, perhaps for the seals, but it wasn't something that comes to my mind, and it wasn't something that was part of our deliberations at the board in relations. So I don't have a lot of clarity about that. I guess it's because it wasn't something that was strongly discussed.
And last question, and it's back to, it is concerning that as electeds, and I know myself, I've been told you will never get elected again. And I'm just wondering, did you get elected again?
I did.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you.
I have one last question for Loretta. When one of your former colleagues, past chair of the park board, Anita Romania,
Yes.
spoke to us on Saturday,
Oh, yes.
she had mentioned, I'm not sure if you were recording this a few years ago, but she said it was the fall of 2005, so it would have been on the eve of that
Yeah.
civic election, that she found out through the media that the aquarium had brought in some dolphins. And I'm just wondering if you recall that event, and I guess as a commissioner, how you felt about finding out about that after that.
My recollection is that staff knew about it. We found out about it after the fact. I do recall, though, we didn't want to make that public information at the time, and the reason for that was for the safety of the animals. We didn't want to have crowds coming to the aquarium at the time that the animals were arriving, because it was a safety issue for the animals. We found out about it as commissioners after the fact. But my understanding is that staff knew about it ahead of time.
So staff knew about it, but the board was unaware?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for me. Any other questions of our speakers? Great. Thank you all very much for coming out.
Thank you very much.